67 million years ago, this 24,000-pound giant lived on the river's edge of subtropical South Dakota. And today we're going to take a look at the biological, geological, and the legal history of this beautiful T-Rex known around the world as Sue. She is the largest T-Rex ever discovered, coming in at over 40 feet long. I know it's hard to see on camera, but she's 13 feet tall at the hip, compared to my 6'1". I'm closer, so I look a little bigger. As I go around the other side, you can see just how large she is. So she lived about 28 years, not quite the full length of T-Rex's life as we know it. And she was named after Sue Hendrickson, the woman who discovered her. But we don't really know if she's male or female. And let's go back in time and place and see where this all started. We're going to leave the Field Museum in Chicago and head over to South Dakota. That's about 850 miles away. We're going to land on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation on land owned by Mr. Morris Williams. And here we can see where about that area is. It's near the Badlands, and you can see it's a large flat plain intersected by these hills of white rock. And that's what we're going to talk about. But 67 million years ago, it didn't look like that. About 100 million years ago, the sea levels were higher, and there was a sea that separated the North America into two, the Great Western Interior Seaway. By Sue's time, the uplift of the interior had raised it enough that the seas retreated, leaving the area looking more like Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, complete with alligators. After about 2 million years of the fluvial deposits in this area, we had about 300 feet thick of what is now known as the Hell Creek Formation, and that is the dinosaur finding capital of the U.S. And as we said, Sue Hendrickson in 1990 found the dinosaur named after her, and she found it while she was waiting for a flat tire to be repaired on the truck. And while folks were in town trying to get it repaired, she stayed around, looked a little bit more, and she discovered Sue in an outcropping. So what we know so far is that Sue was working for the Black Hills Institute of Geological Research on land owned by Maurice Williams on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation. But over a period of 17 days, the Black Hills Institute diagrammed, excavated, and carefully prepared Sue for shipment. Once completed, they paid the landowner $5,000. They had a contract signed up, but Mr. Williams insisted on just a handshake. And so they completed their deal, and they moved Sue to Hill City, South Dakota. What a beautiful place this is. This is home of the Black Hills Institute, and it was in this building right here that they began work on Sue. So if you're ever visiting Mount Rushmore and you go by Keystone, hey, take the train ride up to Hill City. It's a beautiful experience, a great ride, and once you're there, you can walk around and you can go in the Black Hills Institute and see their fantastic museum. It is really worthwhile. Well, they began work on Sue in September of 1990, and it was going to be the highlight of their museum. But on May 14th, 1992, the FBI, the Department of Justice, Bureau of Indian Affairs, National Park Service, South Dakota Highway Patrol, and the South Dakota National Guard all showed up and surrounded the area with police tape. They had a search warrant to collect all fossils collected on Mr. Williams' property, including Sue, crocodilian, duck-billed dinosaur, turtle skull, other T-Rex parts, as well as any other fossils collected on the reservation, and any notes, recordings, etc. thereof. After 3 days, the National Guard transported Sue 25 miles away and put her in the steam room at the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology in Rapid City, South Dakota. Well, no charges were ever brought over the seizure of Sue. However, there was a custody dispute. The U.S. government, Mr. Williams, the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, and the Black Hills Institute all claimed ownership of Sue. The U.S. government eventually dropped their claim, as did the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe after they lost their claim in tribal court. Now, there's one critical piece of information that we didn't know before, and that was that in 1969, Mr. Williams placed his land in trust with the U.S. government. Well, the Black Hills Institute brought suit trying to get a ruling so they could get their dinosaur back. And on February 3rd, 1993, that ruling came in. We're going to take a look at the critical pieces of that. The first piece was that the court found that the fossil is land, and that legal title of land was held by the United States government in trust on behalf of Mr. Morris Williams, who was an Indian. That's going to be important here in a moment, so just hang on. They concluded any sale of land, because it was held in trust, must have been approved by the Secretary of the Interior. Mr. Williams did not request that approval and therefore did not receive it. And as such, without that approval, any sale of Sioux is null and void. So even though they had paid the landowner for Sioux and did the work and found her, they don't get to keep her, because the landowner had not gotten permission to sell it. Now let's go back to that Indian thing. The court also ruled that the claim of any non-Indian about the right to property of which an Indian may be a party, guess what? It's the burden of proof on the non-Indian to prove that the Indian has the right to sell it. How ironic is that? So Sue stayed in the steam room at the School of Mines for another 4 years until Mr. Williams sought approval and received it to sell her. And in October of 1997, Sue was sold at auction for $7.6 million, $8.4 million with the buyer fee, the most amount of money ever spent on a fossil. The good news is that Sue was purchased by the Field Museum in Chicago with generous funding support from Walt Disney Company as well as McDonald's. If you ever get a chance to go to the Field Museum, it is well worth the trip. You can walk right underneath the Titanosaur, a copy of the world's largest dinosaur ever recorded, 122 feet long, 28 feet tall, as well as the fighting elephants that have been there since 1909. What a fascinating museum, and it's home to Sue. Anyway, back to Sue. They spent 30,000 hours at the Field Museum, as well as a special enclosure built at Disney World, and used about a dozen preparators to get Sue ready for display. Sue had her unveiling in May of 2000, and then in December of 2018, she moved to a permanent location, which was built specifically for her. So let's take a look at Sue. We're going to start by taking a look at her head. Isn't that thing a thing of beauty? One thing, that's not a real head. Here's a real head. It's on display right outside. The reason it's kept separately is because it is a well-studied piece, and as you can see from the front, she was probably stepped on after she died and her skull got crushed, so they recreated it to provide a more normal size, and as well to do it light enough that they didn't have to have a special support on the skeleton itself. So in a display case, it can be taken out nice and easy. If you want to back up a little bit, take a look at the holes in her jaw. You can see them right there on the diagram. That's where they think she had an infection, and it actually ate through her jaw. Now let's take a look at her ribs. You will see evidence that she broke several ribs by the bony masses where it grew around. The two on the right actually healed before she died. The one on the left, it was still separated after death. She also broke her tail. You can see there on the left, it was tried to heal. And if you look at the base of the tail, that is what arthritis looks like. Yep, Sue had arthritis. So by the end of her life, her tail was not moving too smoothly. I think many of us can relate to that. If you look closely at her lower leg on the right, you can see also that it had some growth on it, and they think that was an ongoing infection when she died. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the display that they have set up for her. It is fantastic. There you can see a diagram of the life and times along with some other fossils that they found in her area and get a sense of what life was like for her. They have wonderful interactive information displays, and it is just fantastic. You can click on it, and in this case I'm looking around, and highlighted in purple are the bones that are not original on the model right in front of you. They had to replace some of them because, as I said, she was 90% found. Now look at that back there. They have some screens set up that kind of give the life and times of Sue right there. Beautiful. Here's a depiction of Sue possibly having an interaction with a triceratops, and if you watch, they're going to demonstrate how she might have hurt her leg. Right there. And that's one way she could have got hurt, and that injury stayed with her the rest of her life. But what a beautiful museum, what a beautiful specimen, and what a great story about a dinosaur named Sue.